SG Secure will be larger in scope and scale in its outreach. It will have a sharper focus on vigilance and on preparing the community to respond appropriately to potential threats. The success really depends on the community responding to the call, though we intend to do everything we can to bring it to the community. We will roll out programs which seek to touch almost every section of our society on awareness, on responses, and on coming together if there is an attack. Mr. Singh also asked how the home team assesses if an individual has been radicalized and how Singaporeans can be inoculated against extremist teachings. We draw the line quite clearly on support for terrorist groups like ISIS. For example, we have taken action against those who sell ISIS flags. We have taken action against those who propagate ISIS ideology. And those who intend to go to fight in conflict zones, we have taken action against as well. Our experience and the global experience is that radicalization is a process that can happen without forewarning and very quickly, a matter of a month in some cases. We make an assessment of an individual, his motivations, actions, personality, and character. What danger does he pose to society and to the country? We need to be alert even to the slightest indication of danger and take action and leave no one in doubt as to where we stand. Mr. Singh said that other countries, I think he mentioned Bangladesh, perhaps had taken a more nuanced view, and indeed they do. And I want to dwell on this a bit because it's a very important point. Let's take a few examples of countries which have taken a different approach from us. Let's start with Belgium. For years, they allowed hate speech in the name of civil liberties, and that has contributed to the situation that you have in Belgium today. I'm not saying solely, but it certainly has contributed. Other reasons, you have ghettos, you have significant underemployment or unemployment. But the key is the spread of ideology, free and unfettered, in a permissive environment. Because many of those who get involved are not unemployed. They're highly educated and well employed. If you then turn to the UK, and I want to refer to this article, not so much to assert the truth of it from the BBC, but more as to indicate if we had such a situation, how would we deal with it? So almost as if I were to give you a situation, how will Singapore deal with it? It's about a gentleman by the name of Masood Azhar, Pakistani. He was a VIP guest of Britain's leading Islamic scholars. He went to Britain in 1993 for a lecture, and I quote, "When one of the world's most important jihadist leaders landed at Heathrow Airport on 6th of August 1993, a group of Islamic scholars from Britain's largest mosque network was there to welcome him. Visiting preacher was Masood Azhar. Today, he is wanted by the Indian authorities following the attack on Pathankot military base in January this year." The BBC investigation revealed an astounding insight into the way in which hardcore jihadist ideology was promoted in some mainstream UK mosques in the early 1990s and involved some of Britain's most senior Islamic scholars. He is reported to have said that he addressed students and teachers, telling them that a substantial proportion of the Quran had been devoted to, quote, killing for the sake of Allah, close quotes. and that a substantial volume of sayings of the Prophet were on the issue of jihad. He spoke on the divine promise of victory to those engaged in jihad. And he told students, you should prepare for jihad without any delay. You should get jihadist training from wherever you can, and we are also ready to offer our services, and so on and so forth. In Britain, that passed for free speech. We will not allow that. So there are different approaches. If such a person came to Singapore, first of all, he would be prevented from coming to Singapore. And second, if he said those things here, he would be arrested and deported. If a Singaporean said these things, he would be advised not to say them. And if he continued, he would be detained. So it's a different approach. So let's turn to Bangladesh. The 27 men we deported possessed material on them on silent killing, on jihadist propaganda, and how to engage in jihad. They were not thinking of doing it in Singapore. They were discussing it generally. There can be a time gap between thinking about these things and actually carrying it out somewhere. Bangladesh was prepared to put 13 of them on surveillance while detaining the others. For us, these were 27 foreign workers. We made a security assessment. Question is whether we allow them to stay or ask them to leave. So it's a different question from Bangladesh, which has got to deal with what does it do with its own citizens. For us, they are foreign workers. Do we say 13 of them we put on some sort of surveillance and expend our resources, or do we ask all 27 to leave? And I think the acid test will be this question, if I were to pose it to members. How many of your residents will be happy if I put 13 of them in foreign workers' dorms in your constituency? Would you rather them in Singapore or out of Singapore? I think that is the question for us. Supposing there were 27 Singaporeans, then we make distinctions. We look at who is likely to pose a serious and imminent threat, and a detention order will be made under the Internal Security Act against them. The rest, and we have done that frequently over the years, if we believe that they have extremist leanings, but they are quite far removed from actually carrying out or doing something, we advise them, we may put them on a restraining order. So they are free to move around, but with some restrictions. So that's a difference. We treat our citizens differently, but when they are foreign workers, we ask them to leave for obvious reasons. And if we look at Indonesia, for example, again, the differences in approach. 4 Indonesians recently came through, including a 15-year-old boy. ICA did quite well. We picked them up, and we realized that they were going to go off to the Middle East to fight. So we handed them over to the Indonesian authorities. In Singapore, they would have been subjected to the Internal Security Act. No questions. But the Indonesians have released them. They are free to go around thinking of more things to do and perhaps making further attempts to get to the Middle East. Again, difference in approach. The reason I have set out our position quite comprehensively on this is that we need to be guided by our assessment of what is and is not safe for Singapore. And if other countries wish to treat would-be terrorists in a different way, they do so taking the consequences of their decisions. For example, 2 of the suicide bombers who took part in the recent Jakarta attacks had just been released from prison. In Singapore, when we pick them up, we make an assessment, and we do not release them until we believe that they have been rehabilitated. Because a release before rehabilitation means that they may perpetrate more crimes. And in Indonesia, the cost of the decision to release was the blood of innocents. That is the cost that societies take. It doesn't mean that when we release, we can always be absolutely sure that the person will not get back to his ways. It may happen. There is always a risk. But at least we do not need to release until we have made that assessment. I agree with Ms. Rahayu Mazam. We also have to exercise sensitivity in the way we do the messaging, making it clear that our fight is against extremism and violence and not against any particular race or ethnicity or religion. Indeed, the government, through my speeches as well as the speeches of others, has made that absolutely plain. And in fact, we have emphasized the responsibility that the majority in Singapore have to make sure that there is social cohesion, harmony, and peace. We have to make it clear that our fight is against extremism and violence and not against any particular religion. And we have to stay united instead of being divided. Take a collective stand against those who threaten our harmony and way of life, and doing all we can to protect the multiracial, multireligious soul of Singapore.